Hope and Patience with Amelia Rope, a podcast about business, well-being and chocolate.
Hello and welcome to Hope and Patience. It's me, Amelia Rope, the podcast creator and your host. If you're new to Hope and Patience, thank you for tuning in. Every episode, I'll be joined by inspirational souls who will share their stories and precious insights. You'll find the podcast is an exploration. It's about discovery. It's about finding balance between running a business and remembering your well-being. So today, I'm really excited to introduce my guest. She is super talented. She's the nut butter queen, and she is Pip Murray, founder of Pip N Nut.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So as a bit of a background, Pip has achieved massive things. You're 30, aren't you? Or still
31.
under? 30, okay,
Yeah,
31.
start tipping.
So a spring chicken in my book. But the awards that Pip has scooped up along her way include the NatWest Great Britain Entrepreneur of the Year, 2018. Pip N Nut was number 4 in the Startups 100 in 2018. And a massive accolade is that Pip was featured in Forbes 30 Under 30 Europe. So Pip N Nut was launched in 2015. It's achieved massive things because you supply, as far as I'm aware, over 5,000 stores as well as selling online. So Pip, the listeners and I would love to hear, where did it all spring from? Yeah,
I mean, we've been going, as you said, for 5 years, but I actually came up with the idea for the brand about 7 years ago now, which is mad. I can't believe how quickly that's gone. And I think, like a lot of people, it hasn't been sort of one light bulb moment where I sprung up in bed and was like, right, I'm going to launch this company. I think it stemmed from a number of kind of interests and kind of ideas that kind of bubbled up over time. And I think those are rooted in the fact that I think I come from a big family. From an early age, I was cooking for my family, and I was sort of part of that Jamie Oliver revolution when, he's definitely a food hero of mine, but it was a huge influence for me when I was starting to get it, cook more for my family and friends. And so I guess from an early age, it's been an interest. And I think when I left university, not really knowing what to do, and started working in the creative industries, I was a theatre producer before Pip N Nut. I found it really unsatisfying as an industry, and I think I started looking around a bit, and I think food's been an exciting place to, in London, living in London, it's an exciting place to be, I think, in terms of, the melting pot, but also about sort of 7 years ago, it was like the real rise of kind of street food markets and many more kind of like restaurants coming into London. And I think just seeing that kind of influence of sort of more exciting, more innovative foods, and in supermarkets seeing more independent natural brands kind of hit into store, and I started to pay attention to it. And then the reason why peanut butter, well, is that it's just so tasty. Like, it's incredibly addictive, and I just loved that part of it. And I'd be that person, and still am, with a spoon in a jar, like sort of scraping the jar dry. And I kind of picked up a lot of the products in supermarkets about 7 years ago, and the thing that I noticed was that nearly all of them, though, had palm oil in. Being aware of the impact of palm oil on sort of the food system and on your health, I just felt like it could be taken out. And I think also, when I looked at the products available, I was like, God, these all look so Americanized, so processed. And when you look at other categories in supermarkets, you've seen how they've kind of become more evolved and more natural, and have more vibrant brands in that space. And I kind of looked and I was like, you know what, there's definitely a gap here. There's room for a small, health conscious, independent brand to kind of come in here and bring a bit of excitement, new flavours. Things like almond butter hadn't hit mainstream supermarkets back then, and I was like, that's a great product that should be in stores, more available. So I guess it was a number of those little things like threading together before starting on actually like buying a blender and setting up in my kitchen and making the products or the recipes in that first stage.
You're very lucky to have had, from my thing of where I entered into a saturated market with chocolate, to me it's so lucky to have a lovely open space for your product to come into. I want to have a look at the challenges that you faced in your business, because often you can hear people say that it's such a joyride, having your own business. You're so lucky to have your own business. Wow, I'd love to have my own business. And as you and I know, it's actually really challenging. So one of the things I was thinking about is that, as far as I'm aware, you set up the business as a sole pilot like I did with mine. Did you find that challenging, that you were on your own, you didn't set it up with a business partner?
I think the thing that I often find hard is that when you've got certain decisions that need to be made, I don't know, it could be about an employee or it could be about a new product that isn't going very well. You can't sort of pull someone aside that's a complete equal partner in it and just have a really frank, like, what should we do? Am I calling this right, or am I completely off the mark? And those sorts of things where you're actually not really sure about, your own sort of decision making, and you can't really necessarily communicate that to the team because you need to make your mind up first so that you're clear and are kind of leading from the front. So the upside of it is that, when you are making decisions, you can just go for it. You don't have to kind of persuade your business partner that your decision's the way to go. You can be quite single-minded in that sense. And actually, sometimes I think it can slow you down if you get a partner that's not quite right in your business.
What's the most memorable challenge so far that you're happy to share with the listeners?
Fundraising has always been the thing that I don't naturally love. When you start a business, it's not the first thing you think about of all the things that you've got to tackle. I think it's just the level of stress that you experience over quite a long time that sort of slowly chips away at you. So we started the fund, sort of putting together our investment proposal in sort of November 2018, and we didn't close the round till the end of July. And that length of time doing something that I don't thrive in as much as, say, product development or branding, like those are elements of the business I love, I found incredibly tiring. And I think there's always that uncertainty of, although you feel confident in yourself, like, what if I don't raise the money? And that I found hard.
That is the thing that is, which I found when I was looking at fundraising, is it really takes your foot off the gas with running the business and growing it. And it's really tough. So, Pip, with challenges, how do you feel that you approach a challenge? What sort of mindset do you have?
Yeah, it's funny because I think I've got a really low risk threshold. No, the other way around. I've got a high risk threshold in the sense that I don't react to risk very much. I'm pretty chilled out. I don't know why. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. I think that's partly because I think there's always an element of trying to make sure that you give yourself a reality check whenever you're doing anything. So even though you might be stressed out because the factory's let you down and you've got a promotion that's landing in a supermarket, those things are really stressful, but it's not earth-shattering. And, there have been a few moments in the business where there have been like really big problems which have cost us lots of money. And once you kind of ride a couple of those, you start to realise that, you're relatively resilient and only if it's massive will you really get worried. So how do I deal with the pressure? I think it's just a little bit of experience, to be honest, that starts to kind of allow you a bit more space to not react to the small things.
And with your production side, because I come with my production head and my manufacturing head, which I found really challenging, especially when you outsource, because you have got risks of the manufacturing team adapting, in inverted commas, your recipe, and you've got quality control issues. And although you're outsourcing that and you think you can just step back and not micromanage it, actually you do. What I'd like to explore with you is how you cope with outsourcing, and does it have for you upsides and downsides? So the sort of challenges of that from when you were making it home with your blender.
Yeah, I mean, outsourcing it's both great and awful at the same time, in the sense that it can be so frustrating because you can't go in there and just sort a problem out. You can't just tell them exactly what to do. It's their company. You're having to rely on them. So you're like arm's length managing everything. So if you're not getting responses fast enough from your factory because, a piece of packaging has gone wrong and therefore, the month's production is potentially going to be delayed, which then means you might be out of stock on a number of lines, and you want to get in there and just fix it and solve the problem, but actually you need them to be proactively going and solving the problem. And you're right, there is so much trust in it. So you have a product specification, and on that product spec you tell, your recipe and all the parameters that you want to make sure you're controlling, and you have to really trust that they're doing it. And I think the best thing that I can say is that firstly, it's in that kind of when you're meeting at those factories, like really try and validate as much as possible and make sure they're really on board with the level of like quality that you're expecting and make sure they're buying into that. But just keep a really tight hold on those things and don't literally have a zero tolerance on if things slip. And if you need reference samples sent to you every week and it slips, and you chase them on it and you be absolute belligerent about it. And only when you get to trust them a bit further, when they're delivering on what you've asked them, then you start to loosen the reins a bit.
And as you scale up, Pip, you're selling shed loads as far as I can make out. The sustainability side, is that going to become a challenge?
Yeah, so we certified as a B Corp in the summer last year.
Well done.
Thanks. And you know what? In terms of proudest moments, that definitely was up there as probably one of the number one. Loved it. And for those that don't know what B Corp is a certification which essentially is all about business for good. So it's about balancing your purpose and your profit on equal footing. And that's meaning that you have to ensure that as a business you're doing right by sustainability, environmental goals, governance, people, workers, and communities around you. So sustainability is a big part of our business and will be over the for forever, really. And the things that we're working on, for instance, because obviously we're aware, all our jars are packaged into plastic jars. Obviously, a huge backlash against plastic, quite rightly so. And we're working on, for instance, moving those over to glass. So we've got some big projects, and we're just about to do a big analysis of our full supply chain from a carbon footprint perspective to understand how do we get to carbon neutral by 2030. That's our goal as a company. So really starting to, I think, get the data, because the only way you can start to make changes in your supply chain to be more sustainable is to understand really where you're having the biggest impacts. And the only way to understand that is to do a carbon footprint analysis. And then you start being like, right, we're going to target our peanut supplier because actually that's a big carbon output for us, and we'll start to work through some of that things. But it feels big. And as a small business, it can actually feel a bit overwhelming. And knowing where to start is actually the hardest thing. So, yeah, we're working through it. But, yeah, I think if you don't pay attention to it, I think you're just being completely ignorant to the fact that, we're in a complete crisis and that it's only going to continue to become more and more relevant, and that there's a pull from not only supermarkets but consumers. Consumers want change. They want brands to be doing more. And I want to be a brand that does more. So, yeah, it's a big focus for me.
So moving on, Pip, I like getting under the bonnet of the mindsets of people running their own businesses, or more sort of the sort of entrepreneur side, because I think it's fascinating. Did you have a driver, or do you have drivers as to why you're doing what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm unbelievably headstrong and determined. I think it comes from, so I'm dyslexic, and I think it comes from that constant battle with myself that I was always trying to do better than I actually always did. And so, yeah, I think that's been a strength of mine. So when someone says no, I just never take it as no. And if I can't work out how to do it, I'll just keep going until I can figure it out. And I'm an eternal optimist, I think, actually to my fault sometimes, but I would always see the good in something. So if something is going wrong, I'll be like, I'm sure it will sort itself out. Or I'll often round up instead of round down. I'm just that kind of person. And I think if you are running a business, you kind of do need that. Otherwise, you'll just fall at the first hurdle because you think the world's going to end. But optimism is a positive trait, I think, in an entrepreneur.
And how do you maintain your focus, your sort of clear thinking?
I think having a clear plan helps. I do well when I've either got a target or a deadline. I think if I don't, I will meander and be really unproductive. And I'm a bit more of a firefighter than I am a kind of, strategic thinker. So I do like urgency. So we do, as a team, spend quite a lot of time like planning for our next year, and that really helps. And we actually build a one-page business plan every year. So our whole plan for the whole year, every year, will be able to fit on one page, and it clearly outlines exactly what the key things that as a business we're doing, what the key KPIs are, and what our ultimate goal is for that year, and what our purpose is as a business. And that really helps me every time I start drifting off or start getting distracted by some fun new thing that I want to do. Come back to that and say right, but are we delivering on these things? And that really helps keep me sort of focused.
And with running your own gig, you need to keep your motivation up.
Yeah.
How do you sustain your motivation? So the days when you just think, oh gosh, I quite happily curl up on my sofa. What makes you just think, you know what, on we go?
It's so funny because it's a really weird feeling when sometimes you get a bit, I the word lackluster is the wrong word, but unmotivated. I think it happens to everyone when you feel like you're constantly pushing in and it's just things aren't moving how you want them to. And it feels really weird, especially when it's your own business. You're like, I should be the most motivated person in this room, and why am I feeling like this? I think if you are feeling like that, probably there's two things you can do. I think there's either one, just go on holiday and get some space from it, and just, after that fundraise, like I spoke about earlier, I went on like a 3-week walk around Cornwall, and it was just the best thing. I came back and I was like totally refreshed, energized, and just had the space again to come at it. So I think that's one way of doing it. And then I think other ways of getting motivated is just, I don't know, it could be as simple as going and doing a sampling in store, but anything that's sort of customer facing, brand orientated, that will get me like my passions burning again. Because as soon as you can see like connection with the consumer and why people love it, that, when people eat a product of yours and like go, oh my God, I love that, that's so great, and they pick up a jar and then they take it home and you think, oh, they're gonna have that for breakfast tomorrow, that like gets me so excited. So if I spend too long on Excel, I just lose the will to live, and it doesn't really connect me with why I'm doing it.
It sort of puts fuel back in your fire, I think, doesn't it? When you see the customer's reaction, you think, that's why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
It's appreciated, and I'm making a difference to someone when they get their nut butter out.
Yeah.
So, Pip, I have a little inner critic in my mind who is quite harsh. Do you have an inner critic, and how do you manage to switch the inner critic off?
Yeah, I absolutely do. It's an annoying little voice, isn't it, that creeps in every so often. And the things that often will be the thing that it'll critique me on is, things like leadership. I get really kind of a bit antsy about that. If I'm having to do a big presentation to my team and I feel like I'm not landing or being inspirational enough, those are the things when my voice will creep up. I think it helps getting external feedback. So if you are feeling like, oh, that presentation that I did was a bit sort of lackluster and not very inspirational, then ask feedback from people. Either maybe it's something you do genuinely to work on, and that's fine, or actually it was totally fine. So if you've got an inner critic, you need to kind of prove it right or wrong. And I think you can only do that by getting some facts from people. To silence it, really. Otherwise, you just drive yourself mental. But I listened to a great podcast, actually, with Elizabeth Day, and she interviewed Mo Godat, and he really inspiring. I can't remember what the title of his book was, but he's almost said that your inner critic is like almost like it's external to you and it's not a real thing, and that he actually named his inner critic. I think it was called Betty, and every time Betty started speaking, he'd almost talk back.
Yeah.
And I quite liked that also, so I decided to call mine Lizzie, because it's a name that I don't particularly like. And that's my kind of way of tackling it as well, as to some extent.
And Pip, with the decision making, what sort of mindset do you find that you're in when you make effective decisions? And then what sort of mindset are you in when you make less effective ones? Is it because they've had to be quick, instant decisions where you've got little information to help you make the decision? Or what sort of mindset do you have to be in for those decisions?
That's such a good question. Stress does not help if you're trying to make a good decision. I think as soon as you are stressed, you'll be a bit too impulsive. Having said that, there have been some times, and I tend to find this comes with products a lot, when you're trying to decide, should we launch this product or that product? And you have 500 different opinions around the table of reasons why you should and should not do that thing. And that also frustrates me. And I sometimes think that that's when you kind of have to listen to your gut. And regardless of all the useful insights and data that everyone's throwing at you, you as a brand owner should be incredibly close to your product and your brand and innately immersed in it. And then sometimes making like an impulsive decision in that moment when you can feel it in your gut, I think is actually quite a powerful thing, because you can argue yourself out of absolutely everything. And I think particularly with new products, whether you should take the risk on doing something and spend money doing that, you just wouldn't do anything if you looked at the data. Nothing is a good idea if you looked at the data. So that's when I think sometimes gut is just the best thing.
And the joy is that even if you make what supposedly is the wrong decision, you learn from it and it takes you on a different path, leading us into the best bit of the show. Well, I love talking to my guests too, but as most of you will have picked up by now, I love chocolate. And so I said to Pip, which chocolate bar would she like me to get? So she has nominated Tony's Chocoloney, and the flavour was very specific. And it reminds me actually, because I shouldn't really talk about myself, but anyway, I did have a sea salt bar in my collection. So we have got the milk chocolate caramel sea salt bar. And if Pip would like to open that up so that we can tuck in. Sorry, listeners, that you're not getting a taste.
Oh, this is such a treat.
So it's a little treat for me too. And a little bit about...
Have you eaten this before?
I haven't tried it, but a little bit about Chocoloney is that it's really been created to help abolish child labour. And that has been a massive issue within the chocolate industry. Certainly when I was in it, I moved to a Colombian chocolate that actually I'm delighted to see Pip N Nut have got into their new nut butter chocolate cakes by Luca, where I went out there and explored it so that I could check that wasn't taking place. But so it's a really fantastic ethos, and they've got very big partnership from Calabao, massive chocolate company, and a Dutch retailer. So it's exciting. They have an open chain platform. So now it's time for me to be quiet.
I've already tucked in. Is that bad?
That's really rude. And the producer and the wonderful sound guy can only just see. They can't taste either. Too bad.
Oh God, it's so delicious.
Gosh, it's huge chunks.
Thank you
It's
very
so
much.
yummy.
Just appeared for a chunk.
Thank you.
Yum.
I love
So
the
now- Yeah.
the like crunchy bits
Crunch bits are really good. So
and the salt.
And the salt. It really is a very good bar. And we've got 180 grams to share amongst ourselves. Okay, so back to it, Pip. You've had your chocolate break.
Thank you.
So a little bit about... Sorry, I haven't finished my big chunk of chocolate. I was too greedy. A little bit about some words that seem to get spun around a lot, and it always intrigues me as to what people think they mean to them. So the first word is entrepreneur. What does that word mean to you? Who is an entrepreneur? Who isn't?
God, I hate that word, and I actually never ever use it in association with myself, because I think it's so tarnished with like, and this is not to say I don't think Richard Branson's a great entrepreneur, but like kind of like big, bold, kind of often male kind of leaders, and that have a very extrovert style. And I find it's almost intimidating when I think a lot of people say, oh, I don't have an entrepreneurial streak. And actually, I think so many people do have some level, whether it's bigger or smaller in their personality. And I think being an entrepreneur almost stops people from doing or setting something up because they feel that they're not that like larger than life character. And I think whilst I think a lot of entrepreneurs are often quite charismatic, you can be that in multiple different ways. You can do that quite quietly or in subtler ways.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? The whole entrepreneur thing. There are so many sort of startup people who are now called entrepreneurs and or small business owners, and I'm just intrigued. So the other word that I would love to run past you is the word success. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think success is often wrapped up in sort of money, isn't it? Like if you hit X million sales a year, you're a success, or you win awards and you're a success. But I think the things that kind of for me feel like success is like if I have a team that are happy, that aren't leaving, and that have been in the business for like the whole journey, or at least the majority of it, and are excited and as passionate about it as I am, and they have an exciting career and they're enjoying that. That feels like successful, and a brand that also isn't the biggest but maybe the most loved. For me, that's a really important measure, I think, versus say revenue, which doesn't necessarily reflect how much actually people are engaged with your brand, how much they believe in the reason why you're doing it, and that is what. If we can get to a point where our brand becomes so synonymous with like our consumers and so connected with them in a way that other brands haven't been able to do, I think that is powerful.
Yeah, there's a lot of turnover vanity. That's what I found. And I say, what's your turnover? And I'd wince, thinking it doesn't meet the value of the brand.
Yeah.
So Malcolm Forbes, he says that, and I know Elizabeth Day, who's got a fantastic podcast, I love listening to hers as well, says that failure is success if we learn from it. How do you interpret the word failure?
I do think it's a bit of a gimmicky word at the moment, but I do acknowledge that failures are a leaping or a stepping stone to getting to where you want to go to, and to that success that you're after, and are a necessary thing to go through fundamentally, and certainly nothing to be ashamed of at all. I think particularly in sort of our business, we do try and create as much as possible like an open culture where people can speak about things that are going right as well as wrong. And you really have to be like mindful of yourself when someone sort of admits, oh, you know, I dropped the ball on this particular thing, and to not like jump down on their throats and say like, well, why did you do that? And just say acknowledge it and hope that they won't do it again, and put in some, processes to help them not do it again. But yeah, it's an inevitability, isn't it, of running a company. But funnily enough, sometimes when I look back and I get asked what's my biggest failure, I don't know if there's anything that I've particularly changed, even though there have been some monumental issues that have cropped up. I really don't think I would want to switch any of them out, because I think they've helped me learn.
Yeah, I the same with my business. I don't feel I was a failure with it. I think anyone to get off the backside and get going and set up a business has taken out the word failure, because that takes huge guts.
Yeah.
So we're now going to swing swiftly into the wellbeing section, Pip.
Great.
So what I would love to know is, with stress, how and where does it affect you? How does it manifest?
I think stress normally makes me pretty blunt and short with people. You can almost see the dark cloud before you even approach me, and it's almost like an energy. I think you can feel it from people when they are, and you can certainly from me when I'm feeling stressed. And it will make me more negative as well, and it also it'll play havoc with my sleep. I will be waking up at 2-3 o'clock in the morning with those like bullet ideas that pop into your mind.
Do you then write it down? That's what I found helped, was that I had a notebook, because I'd wake up in a hot sweat thinking, oh no, I haven't done this, or I have done that, or whatever. And I would just write it down, and then I could get back to sleep. What do you get up? How do you handle the sleep side?
I think that's such a good idea. I don't do that, but I should. I used to have my phone by my bed, and now my New Year's resolution was to remove it. Yes, I was going to ask
you, Pip, is your phone in your bedroom or out of your bedroom when you sleep? And is it on? If it's in the bedroom, is it on or off?
So it's now out of my bedroom, and it has been for the whole of January so far, and I love it. It is. I sleep so much better, and actually it stops those 2 a.m. Oh, I'll just have a look. I'll just go on my phone, and then I get onto Instagram, get onto our Slack or whatever. Because phones are the devil, aren't they?
They are the devil. I'm lucky because, your generation, you grew up with phones. I didn't. So for me, I can be quite ruthless, and I'll turn mine off at 8 at night. But I do have a landline, and I don't have dependents. But it's one of those things where I just think, you know what? No more messages. If you ring me, I'm out. Because when I was younger, we could scoot around. There weren't even answering machines.
That's so liberating.
A lot of freedom. So back on wellbeing. How important is wellbeing to you, and what won't you compromise on to maintain your well-being?
I think there are two things that I won't compromise. I have to do exercise at least 3 times a week. Otherwise I become edgy is the word I always use. And it always is running. Like, I will do other things, but running is my meditation in that sense. It doesn't even need to be a long run. It could be 20 minutes around the park, but getting out and getting some fresh air is really, really important to me. And then the second thing is, I do love cooking. And actually, the moment I start, I don't know, putting ready meals on, or like that kind of, just not giving myself at least an hour to cook something, it really bothers me. And it doesn't have to be every night, but I love that. I just love it, and it makes me feel good, and I know it's more nourishing. And so those two elements, I think, for me, go absolutely hand in hand. Do
you have time for friends and relationships and family? Because that's something I pulled the plug on, and I really regretted it.
Yeah, definitely in the first few years. Only really in the last, I think, 2 years has it been like a really much more of a focus to kind of rebuild that part of my life. But I do have my weekends, and my evenings are most of the time free as well. So I have a little bit more balance in that sense. But I think, relationships can really suffer, particularly, boyfriends and stuff. I actually broke up with my boyfriend during the investment round that I was doing because I think things started to take over too much. So,
and then one needs to be really channeled and focused, and anyone on the periphery, you can't attend to them.
Yeah.
So, Pip, if you're happy to share your favourite hideaway with our listeners, we would love to know where you go to, where that magical place is.
Like I said, I went to Cornwall in the summer and just absolutely fell in love with it. So if I could easily magic myself somewhere, it would probably be on the Lizard, which is like a peninsula in Cornwall, and there's a
wonderful,
it's so beautiful. There's a particular place called Kynance Cove, which is
yes, I've
gorgeous.
been there. Yeah,
and that would be where I'd go. I'd just hide there, ideally like on a sunny day.
Yeah, ideally with the sun. And have you got a book or a song that you'd share with our listeners that they could listen to or have a read of?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give 2 books, one business, one nicer, easier read. A Little Life by, I always forget the name of the author, but A Little Life, it's one of the best books I've ever read. It's
I need to write that down.
An incredible book about sort of male friendship, and the characters are so beautifully written. And my favourite business book that I regularly go back to is The Hard Things About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz.
Oh, I haven't read that. What's it called? The Hard
Things About Hard Things. And I love it because it does delve into all the gritty things, from how do you fire someone to what happens when everything's going wrong. He built a massive tech company in the States. So even though it's tech, it's still relevant, I think, for any startup founder.
So we need to get reading that. And just very quickly, Pip, a song.
Probably I'm a bit melancholy when it comes to songs. So my favourite song, if I'm kind of doing work or album, is The National. And I'd probably listen to Quiet Life, which is one of their sort of new songs on their current album.
Lovely. So winding up, would you share with us something in your business life or personal life, whatever, where you've had to have a dollop load of hope and sometime where you've had to have a massive amount of patience?
Yeah, I mean, I think the startup phase is always about hope. So I spent 2 years setting up the business, and I spent 8 months trying to find a factory that would make the product. So this is when you've got absolutely nothing, and you just sort of sit there calling up factories being like, I hope that someone can make it at some point. So yeah, that I remember constantly being like, well, I don't have a company until I know how I can make it. And the second one, where I've had patience. I mean, to be honest, the nut butter cups that we just launched was an incredibly painful product to get to market. Again, it took loads and loads of searches to find the right factory, and then so many trials to get that product right. And again, it can get to the point where you start to lose patience and think, oh, just get that in the market, it's fine. We actually delayed the launch a number of times by about 8 months, which was really frustrating. We could have launched, but we'd have had a substandard product. And that's the sort of thing where you're like, no, you have to be patient. You have to sit with it.
And do you have a tip for the fuel tank of our listeners at all?
Well, what do I do to fill up my fuel tank? I'd go for lunch or coffee with a friend in the industry if I needed a bit of a little pick me up. So I guess it's not particularly practical. I'd just say make sure that you're constantly building connections and having nice chats with people to kind of inspire you to keep you going. Sometimes a simple coffee can get you
that's a very
going.
Valuable tip. So Pip, now we lead on to anything new, especially if it's anything new with chocolate.
Well, this is it. This is my callous business plug, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, we've just launched our nut butter cups, which is essentially like a healthy Reese's, if you like. So they are a range of all natural nut butter cups made with single origin Colombian chocolate from lovely Luca chocolate, and with our own nut butter in the centre, and they're sort of bite-sized little morsels. But yeah, super delicious. They've just gone into Boots and Whole Foods and Ocado. So,
great,
yeah.
So we can get stocking up.
You can.
So I'd love to say thank you to Pip. You are a real star, Pip. You are so honest with the way that you share your insights, and I've really enjoyed interviewing you. It's been great, and I feel very touched that you've come on my 3rd episode of Hope and Patience.
Thank you for having me.
So you can find Pip N Nut in Boots, Sainsbury's, Tesco's. I mean, online, is that the best place to find the stockists?
Yeah, you can go onto our website, pipandnut.com, if you want to see where we're stocked, or you can buy through our website as well. So
I would scoot along if you don't know about Pip N Nut. So thank you very much, Pip.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
I'd love to remind you all about the goodie bag section on the website, where you'll find tips and recommendations for your well-being and also a good read. This week, instead of recommending a book, I want to recommend a website which has been set up by an inspirational guy called Oliver Chittenden and his team, and it's called headtalks.com. It's a fantastic website where it's a resource for well-being and mental health. There are masterclasses, there's really interesting blogs, so do just check it out. It's my new find. In fact, it was recommended to me by my first guest, Rowan Blacker of Pookie Lighting. So thank you, Rowan, very much for that. The quote for this week is by an author who you might or might not have heard of, Ralph Waldo Emerson. And this is my quote, or rather Ralph's. Life is a series of surprises and would not be worth taking or keeping if it were not. And finally, before I go, I was having a little thought about the landscape in business and how much it's changed from when I set up my business, which was back in 2007. In 2007, there really weren't very many women in business at all. And we got quite a rough ride. You know, I certainly, when I was looking for investment, was bullied. I had someone who I think had an ulterior motive to get beyond what was on offer, which was chocolate. There just was no support. I mean, we were really on our own. And I remember, you know, if you use the hashtag women in business, there was almost nobody using it. Now on Instagram, certainly when you put in female founders, there are 433,000 hashtags on that. And women in business is something like 9.1 million in Instagram. I think it's really refreshing. It needed to happen. It's exciting. But what I'm thinking, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on, is that now I feel we've got that sort of equality. We've got a really good hotbed of men in business. In fact, if you look at hashtags, there are no hashtags for guys in biz. For men in biz, there are only 5,000 hashtags. For male founders, 500. So, I mean, that's a really interesting thing to think about. But I sort of feel now that we've done that side and that there's more to it. There's a more embracing, there's a more inclusive thing rather than just taking it as a sort of sexual differentiation. I still obviously promote women in business because we rock. But I would love to hear your thoughts about it. Again, just send me an email through the website, which is hopeandpatience.co.uk. And if we get some chat going, maybe it's on social media, then we can perhaps discuss it in a show, bring a guest in. And so thanks for joining us and for finding us. I'll be back with another story soon, so make sure you subscribe to get the latest episode. And if you like what you hear, feel free to give us a positive rating and spread the word. I also would love to know what you'd like to hear more of, less of, and importantly too, none of. So just ping me an email via the website. So until next time, keep that sparkle. Bye.
Hope and Patience with Amelia Rope. Join the conversation at hopeandpatience.co.uk or find Amelia on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter @Hope and Pat.